Welcome into another episode of Bully Ball. I'm Jason Aponte. That's Rob Stats Guerrera as Steph Sanchez has boots on the ground at training camp currently. We're going to talk about, do the 49ers really still think about the Super Bowl? What's going on at camp? And what's the new role that Deebo Samuel is fighting for? Stick around. I'm Jason Aponte. That is Rob Stats Guerrera. This is the Bully Ball Podcast. Steph Sanchez is at camp right now, so make sure you guys are following her so you can get all your updates as well. I believe the last thing that she just sent out was there were 3 people on punt returns: Ronnie Bell, Trent Taylor, the preseason GOAT, and Ricky Pearsall, which is good news to hear, right? First round pick back in there. But first of all, before we get into all that, Rob, how are you, man?
Jason, I'm good. Thanks for letting me pinch hit. Appreciate Steph as always at training camp. She'll have a full training camp report for us once she gets done. She always empties the notebook. Those are on our YouTube channel if you want to go and check those out. Not now. This is our time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hate to bring up a sore subject because it is something that is sore. It's something that we're going to think about for a long time. But I found it kind of strange that, if I'm not mistaken, 2 press conferences ago, Kyle Shanahan was asked whether Brock Purdy and him have reviewed some of the crucial plays of the Super Bowl. And for me, I didn't really hear the question very well, and I was annoyed already off the bat because it's training camp. There's a lot of things to talk about. There's a new team here. There's updates to be had with rookies and who's doing well, and why are we rehashing this? Well, Kyle gave a pretty Kyle answer, which was, yeah, I've seen it 3-4 times. We've talked about it. Okay. But Aaron Banks yesterday was asked about the critical third down play in overtime in which there was a miscommunication between Spencer Burford and Colton McKivitz, which allowed Chris Jones to be a free rusher. And Aaron Banks had quite an interesting answer. Rob, do you have the clip, or are we just going to run with what he said?
I have the clip. Here we go.
All right.
Said the other day that the mistake that Spencer made in the Super Bowl was very tough on Spencer. Do you guys, do you talk to him about that, and what kind of advice or relief can you give a guy after something like that happens?
Poor subject. Yeah, I'm gonna pass on that one.
Oh, baby. Sore subject, I'm gonna pass on that one. Now, I don't want to sensationalize something that is a 2-sentence answer. But sore subject, I'm going to pass on that. Oh, dear. Rob, is this Super Bowl still running through this team's head at the end of July while they're at training camp?
It's the first instance I've ever seen from anybody on this team that's a Super Bowl, of a Super Bowl hangover type thing, right? Because here's the thing. Aaron Banks could have said, hey, man, we all missed blocks. Chris Forster even said Aaron Banks missed kind of a similar play that Burford missed earlier in the game. He could have said that, right? He could have said, hey, Super Bowl, I just told him we're here to turn the page. We're thinking about 2024. There are so many different ways that Aaron Banks could have answered that question. And instead, the only thing he said is the block is a sore subject, and then didn't answer at all. When I saw that, that was like a lean forward moment. I was like, oh my goodness.
And all right, of course they've talked about it. I mean, the way that it was handled right after the Super Bowl, there were raw emotions in which John Feliciano is tweeting about it and saying, hey, I didn't miss my block or whatever, right? But I don't know if that answer means more of, I don't want to talk about it because it still hurts, or I'm really upset about it still, right? And I mean, look, of course the team's upset about it. I think no matter how long they live, they're going to be thinking about that moment. Even if they reach the top of the mountain this season, they're still going to be thinking about how close they were. But man, is that interesting. Now, on the heels of that, Kyle Juszczyk was asked about the narrative of the 49ers not being able to win big games. And he gave a pretty, I don't want to say snarky, but it definitely had a little heat on it, a little spice, just a little spice to the answer. So let's take a look at that.
One of the narratives that I hate to hear about us as a team is that, the Niners can't win the big game. because, you know, we lost in 2 Super Bowls, which it's just crazy. If you know anything about football, you realize how many big games we did win in order to put ourselves in those positions. I mean, what was in 22, we started like 3-5 and had to win 12 games in a row. Those were big games. And winning in the NFC Championship when you're down 17 at halftime, that was winning a really big game. So I just hate to hear that narrative. But, you know, we do know that, you know, if we get our chance again in the Super Bowl, we just got to finish the job.
Now, Kyle's not wrong. Kyle is not wrong. They've won many, many big games. But I think no one's saying that they can't win big games. They're saying they can't win the game. That's not the narrative, in my opinion, because this postseason was all about busting narratives. Down 17, can't come back, you know, whatever the point differential is. And of course, now it's, well, let's move the goalpost. And Kyle Shanahan hasn't won since, what is it, eight points, right? Like now it went from, hey, he can't come back from 7. He comes back from 7. Well, now do it from 8, right? And then from Mars, right? But I don't think the narrative is that they can't win big games. It's just that they haven't been able to finish the biggest game. What would you say, Rob?
I would agree with that. I don't think his best argument is talking about regular season games after you start 3-5, but he's right. You can't get to the Super Bowl unless you win big games. NFC Championship games are big games. Divisional playoff games are big games. I mean, hell, the Cowboys haven't even made the NFC Championship game since 1995. Like, playoff games are big games. They have won a ton of big games. You can't tell me that going into Philly last year was not a big game, and they crushed the Eagles. Like, they have won a lot of big games. They just haven't won the biggest game. And I get that. Like, we're all frustrated by that. I get that. But 2 things can be true. 49ers don't have a Super Bowl, and they still win a lot of big games. And that's where we are. And I think that's hard for some people.
How helpful would it be to not face the Kansas City Chiefs in the big game?
Right. Yes, please. Or not have to face the greatest quarterback of his generation.
And the one time the 49ers were actually set up to not face him in the Super Bowl, unfortunately, they weren't able to finish in LA in the NFC Championship. That was the year that the Bengals made it. So I want to be, and Rob, you asked me this before we got on about, I don't care, just win it, right? I think a lot of people underestimate what has to go your way for your team to win the Super Bowl. Very rarely does the quote unquote best team, best roster, very rarely do they win the Super Bowl. Very rarely, because not only do you have to have injury luck on your side, you have to win enough games to have home field advantage. You have to have luck, a ball bounce your way. You have to have a team make critical mistakes on the other side at times. So much of this is in the equation of winning a Super Bowl. If the best team every single year, all throughout the season, would be the Super Bowl champion, and the Philadelphia Eagles would have beat the Kansas City Chiefs a few years ago. The San Francisco 49ers would have beat the Kansas City Chiefs last year. It's not how it works. It's just not how it works. And very rarely does the best team win. And so many things have to go your way. You can't have critical injuries to important players. You have to have a little bit of luck. You have to have the refs call a critical call on against the other team for you. There's so many little things that just add up, right? You can't have your right guard get hurt. You can't have Dre Greenlaw tear his Achilles. You can't have the ball bounce off of Darrell Luter's foot. You can't have a missed extra point. You can't have a blown block on all of these things. All of these things lead to a Super Bowl victory. So I understand 49ers fans' frustration in terms of, oh yeah, we're the number one at the top of the list, the best roster, and everyone agrees that this team is just win. I get that part. It's not as easy as all that. And I think, again, if you were to ask other fans of other teams, would you rather have your team be involved every single year in the conversation, at least getting close, right? Getting there, or be completely out of the equation and not have any shot? I guarantee you, if you ask the Dallas Cowboy fan, would you rather get to the NFC Championship game or a Super Bowl and then lose there rather than get bounced embarrassingly in the first round or have an 8-8 record or something like that? I guarantee you 10 out of 10 times a fan would choose 49ers fans' plight right now over their own.
Right. And that doesn't mean we're satisfied with not winning
At all.
Super Bowls. But
At all.
again, two things can be true.
Yes.
Yes, we want them to win Super Bowls. It's also been really, really good. In the last 13 NFC Championship games, the Niners have been in 7 of them. So I do think part of this, too, is some carryover from some frustration with what happened with Jim Harbaugh, right? Because as a fan base, we have been so close for a really long time. We've had a lot of bites at the apple already, and it hasn't come through. But yeah, this is still really good. And by the way, there's no reason they can't get right back this year. There is absolutely no reason that they won't be just as good this year.
Yeah, exactly. And this is kind of the funny part about the whole Super Bowl hangover thing, right? Is this team has gone to the NFC Championship, had their heart ripped out twice, and then they bounced right back and made it back. So why is it now this year is the year where they're like, oh, I don't know if they can do it again? Well, what do you mean? 2021, if I'm not mistaken, is the Rams season. 2022 is the Eagles season. That's back-to-back NFC Championship games. 2023, they made the Super Bowl. But this year is the year the 49ers can't do it again. They're like, I don't understand how, after 3 straight years of being that close, now all of a sudden the Super Bowl hangover is so real that they're not going to be able. I don't get that thinking. I really don't. Particularly when you look around the NFC, right? If we're gonna keep piling on the Cowboys, I'm not scared of them. They're not that good. If we're gonna pile on the Eagles, they've got to show me something, because I'm not sure that their first season in which they made the Super Bowl wasn't more of a fluke. I think the teams that you're really looking at in the NFC that are scary are the Detroit Lions, who have made significant improvements, and they were that close to beating the 49ers. But again, who knows if they can make it back again, because let's not underestimate how hard that is for them again. And possibly the Green Bay Packers, who, this is a good segue into this topic, but the 49ers are still the cream of the crop in the NFC. So for everyone to look you in the face and say, well, I don't know how they're going to make it back. Well, explain the last 3 seasons. Explain the last 3 seasons, because they've had their heart ripped out a bunch of times and they've been able to find a way to get there. You know why? They're a very good football team. They're very well coached, and they continue to execute in some of the big moments, just not the biggest moment.
Like, if you want to say, oh, the 49ers were lucky to get to the Super Bowl this year, I think that's crazy. But the Niners also had 2 quarterbacks go down with season-ending injuries in 2022 and still made the NFC Championship game. And they may have won the Super Bowl if Brock, or got to the Super Bowl at least, if Brock didn't get hurt. They weren't supposed to get to the NFC Championship game that year. So the year that you're talking about, like, oh, maybe things don't go right for the 49ers, that already happened and they still got there. So, like, I look at the NFC. There's one team right now that's a contender in the NFC that, to me, has an ascending quarterback, maybe, and that's Green Bay with Jordan Love. Everybody else, even the Lions, yes, their roster is really good. To me, Jared Goff is not ascending. He's not over the hill or anything like that, but he's not on his way up. Everybody else has either a super young quarterback, guys that were drafted, or they've got Matt Stafford, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, guys that, to me, are not ascending. Brock Purdy is ascending. He's young right now. There's every reason to believe that Brock Purdy could be even better in 2024. Maybe not statistically, but just in terms of playing better, he might be better this year. So, I think there's no reason why the 49ers can't get back. There's a reason they lead the Vegas odds. I don't think it's an accident.
Yeah. Hey, they've done it 3 years in a row, but this is the year finally that they're not going to be able to do it. Like, I'm not going to bet against again. And look at the Kansas City Chiefs. I understand they have a great quarterback, but it's still very hard to do what they're doing. They're still having to go through what they're having to go through. I mean, for the first time in Patrick Mahomes' career, he had to go on the road to make the Super Bowl, right? And he beat the Buffalo Bills and he beat the Baltimore Ravens. So they can continue to go, and obviously it's easier to go when you win. But the 49ers have done it 3 straight years where they've been right there on the cusp of it. If I see something 3 times in a row, I'm not going to bet against it on the 4th time. It just doesn't make sense, in my opinion.
Something that made me very excited about the Niners and Brock was the interview that he gave to Mike Silver in the San Francisco Chronicle, which you did not get a chance to see. So I'm fascinated to see some of your reactions to this stuff. I talked about it a little bit. I'll throw up the quote board for anybody that hasn't seen it. Here's one of the first things he said. He talked about wanting to dominate. Brock said, quote, "It's having that Tom Brady kind of feeling. Late in the game, it always felt like Tom was just going to take over and not make it close. I feel like I can get to that." Like, who is this Brock Purdy? Because behind a microphone, that's not who Brock Purdy is. That's the on-field Brock Purdy that made that comment.
Yeah, and this is in line kind of with a training camp moment in which I believe Deebo ran the wrong route and he tore into him in training camp. And that's just the type of guy that he is on the field, and that's what they respect.
Yeah, that was in the article with Silver. Before the ball left his hand, he was yelling at Deebo, according to Brock. That's the story that Brock himself told. Here's another comment from Purdy. What do you think of this? There were moments in games last year we'd be up and it's, all right, be smart with the ball, or let's just make sure we don't mess up. I want to break through that and get to this point of just being dominant for 4 quarters, man. That's my mindset. Keep in mind, Jason, they were putting up 30 on everybody last year. They scored 60 touchdowns on offense, more than any other offense in the league. And Brock's essentially saying he took his foot off the gas.
I love it because it's a common complaint with Kyle Shanahan about being too conservative. It's playing to not lose as opposed to playing to win. And I think we've seen a little bit of a shift with that with Kyle because of the trust that he has with Brock, right? I think if Jimmy Garoppolo, I hate to keep bringing him up. If Jimmy Garoppolo was the quarterback and they were up, it's all about like, all right, guys, let's just get out of here with a win. I think there is a little bit of a change, but it is a common complaint for 49er fans with Kyle about, all right, man, like, let's go for the throat here. You know, we look at Dan Campbell sometimes and we're like, what are you doing on 4th quarters? But man, or are you doing on 4th downs? And man, their team loves that. They love that idea of like, yeah, let's snap their neck right now. Let's get this done right now. And there's a way to put this out right now. Now, with every reward comes risk. But I do think that there's a lot of 49er fans that feel, I wish that we were a little bit more aggressive. I think that's a common complaint with Kyle about 4th down aggressiveness, sometimes just taking the field goal. If your offense is humming, if you have Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and Brandon Aiyuk, and you have all this trust in Brock, man, let's go for it. Like, they're not stopping us. Let's continue to finish that, right? And I think that's kind of where Brock is. And again, Brock continues to just say the right things and says things that over and over that I'm just impressed with. I mean, I think the young man has a hunger that has kind of been built in him because of him being the last pick. And I'm sure he feels disrespected by that because how could you not? Why would all of these teams pass me? And that's what I kind of like about, you know, Amon-Ra St. Brown having the 14 receivers that were taken ahead of him. I like that. Play with that chip on your shoulder. Always play with that. So I think, again, Brock continues to do the same thing. And kind of what you were saying to, you know, switching this over to Jordan Love. Jordan Love got paid. And oh boy, did Jordan Love get paid.
Mm-hmm.
So Jordan Love gets the highest contract a quarterback has ever gotten. And don't worry, guys, that will be broken by the next person who's going to sign and the next person who's going to sign. Tua Tagovailoa was signed right before him. So it goes back to the whole thing of, well, what did we see from Jordan Love early in the season? We saw a guy trying to figure it out, struggled a little bit, and then down the stretch, he played very well. But they're betting on that being what he's going to be. Now, there's no reason to think that he won't be as good, right? Like, it's hard to predict what's going to happen, but he got paid on the back of a second half. What is Brock Purdy going to say after he's, 2 straight seasons? 2 straight seasons of what he's been able to do and the numbers that he put up last year in particular.
And we know what Brock thinks of himself. He just gave an interview with Tim Kawakami, and Tim asked him, like, what did you think when Kyle told you, hey, you're going to be the starter in 2023 unless we can go get Tom Brady? And Brock's response was like, yeah, I get it, but also I just kicked the hell out of Tom Brady. Why can't it be me? Like, Brock is not, aw shucks, he's going to want top of the market quarterback money because Brock thinks Brock is that good, and which is what you want from your quarterback. Remember when Bosa said to him, how are you doing this? And Brock's response was, I can be even better. He immediately said, I can be even better. Like, his mindset is, I'm the man. I got that dog in me, and he's going to want to get paid, and he's going to deserve it if he has another season this year like he did last year.
100%. And who's to say that there's not improvement for Brock Purdy either? And, Steph and I have talked about it. The improvements from Brock won't be statistically because how hard is it going to be as efficient and as good as he was last year? Again, Now it's certainly possible. The improvements are going to come with the eye test. It's going to come with understanding where the free rusher is, getting the ball out on time, a little bit more of pre-snap stuff where he's able to diagnose a little bit better. And I think, again, with everyone's concern about the offensive line, which we are definitely going to touch on that, with what's going on in training camp, especially because Trent Williams is not there. I think the 49ers are betting on Brock being better at everything that leads to pass protection, meaning diagnosing pre-snap, make sure the ball gets out. If you can see where the free rusher is coming from, you're supposed to throw the ball into the blitz. All of these things, a jump from Brock Purdy can lead to a jump in pass protection. I know that sounds crazy, but if he starts to see things a lot better, Tom Brady was great at diagnosing where it's coming from and throwing the ball right into it, not being confused. If there's a jump mentally, then it helps inherently for the pass protection. But it's funny because the NFL is doing the top 100 player list. And I understand we get all worked up about this, right? And the NFL top 100 player list is done by the players. I think this one year they're not doing it on NFL Network. It's just being released on NFL Plus, if I'm not mistaken, which is why we're just seeing tweets about it and we're not seeing the actual clips and everything. But speaking of Jordan Love and Brock Purdy, Jordan Love is 34 on this list. Brock Purdy's 28. Rob Stats Guerrera over Joe Burrow, Matt Stafford, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Brock Purdy, number 28 out of the top 100 players. Go, react.
I mean, it's fascinating to see, right? Because again, this isn't a media ranking. This is a players ranking. Brock Purdy above Jordan Love, above Joe Burrow, above Matthew Stafford by a lot too, by the way. Stafford's 42, Brock Purdy's 28 on the list, ahead of Justin Herbert. So we can sit here and say all we want about, where we rank these guys. The actual players themselves have it ranked out this way. Now, there are some flaws with the list. I get it, but I was stunned to see Brock Purdy this high on their list.
Yes. And let's be fair. Let's be completely fair. Joe Burrow was injured last year. If Joe Burrow puts together another one of his Joe Burrow seasons, it's highly likely that he's going to be ahead of Brock Purdy, right?
Agreed.
And there's going to be other quarterbacks that are ahead of Brock Purdy. He's not going to be the last quarterback on this list. But the players are starting to realize something, right? And I hate to do this. Jimmy Garoppolo was on this list after 2019 as well, too. Okay. But Jimmy Garoppolo was very good in 2019. He was very good. That's fair to say, right? Like, I understand it. I know, Rob. I know. I am giving Jimmy Garoppolo credit. I understand how that makes you feel. He was good. He was good in 2019. But this is a sign of ultimate respect. By the way, number 27 ended up being Nick Bosa. So Brock Purdy, Nick Bosa, back to back. Yeah. But this is ultimate praise from NFL players, defenders, other people that are watching him, because they have seen this 49ers offense have varying degrees of success with other quarterbacks. Brock doesn't just raise the floor. He raises the ceiling on this offense. And I think that's what a lot of people around the league, it's hard for me to have people say, well, he's a product of the system. If he's a product of the system, then why isn't everybody operating it to the level that he was, right? And obviously the quarterbacks that were there before, Brian Hoyer, Jimmy Garoppolo, CJ Beathard, Nick Mullins, right? Okay, this isn't a murderer's row of quarterbacks. But even when the 49ers were as efficient as they were in 2019 with that offense, it's never been seen to this level. And obviously the skill players have changed and Deebo's developed and all those things. But there's a reason that Brock's on this list. And I think, again, it's because he does raise the efficiency level of this offense. And the only person that has operated the offense to this level, a Kyle Shanahan offense, was MVP Matt Ryan. And I think that's your comparison. It's not the guys that came before him with the 49ers.
And honestly, if Brock doesn't have his worst game of the season on Christmas last year against the Ravens, he might be the MVP. I mean, that lost him the MVP. That game, he was right up there. And then afterwards, right after everybody said, oh, now we don't have to pretend like Brock Purdy should be the MVP. Like, no, it wasn't pretending. He was kicking ass last year. So, we'll see if he can improve. I agree with what you said about the statistics. Like, the improvement from Brock will be hitting Aiyuk on that slant on 3rd and 5 instead of looking outside in like he did. That's the improvement that he'll make, which is really hard to see, for a casual fan or for somebody that's, doesn't follow the 49ers. But that's where we will see the improvement in Brock Purdy. But it was nice to see him get a little bit of love.
Yeah, pretty cool. Jordan Love is behind Brock Purdy, though. But the contract obviously is something that's a point of contention because $65 million has been floated out there. And I believe it was Bill Barnwell who wrote an article about that. By the way, Bill Barnwell wrote an incredible article about the ripple effects of the Trey Lance first round picks. And, I think we've all kind of said, if they would have stuck at 12, the 49ers could have drafted Micah Parsons to have with Nick Bosa. But then you've got this whole bigger issue of you got to pay Parsons, you got to pay everybody else. There is a ripple effect to all of that or whatever. But it is a real fascinating article for anybody who hasn't checked it out. And they talked about how Brock has kind of made us forget that the 49ers sent all that capital and what he's been able to do. So, but yeah, look, Brock is going to get paid. And I don't believe that he's going to take a hometown discount. Nor should he. Nor should he. Nor should he. If you look at somebody who is in the 7th round, pretty much left for dead in the NFL draft world, how he found his way up this team, right? Like, moving his way up. Obviously, it was injuries, but everybody takes advantage of their opportunities, and he never let it go. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I will not take a hometown discount. This game don't love you back. Make as much money as you can.
He's already played. He's already had a major injury. Absolutely not. Make as much money as you can. By the way, I know everyone was very, very nervous yesterday because Brock Purdy threw 3 interceptions, Jay.
Oh, let's do it.
He's 7 for 7 today with a deep touchdown to Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey. Ricky Pearsall has a nice catch, so we can all exhale. I can't wait to talk to Grant Cohn tomorrow and just absolutely billy club him for his latest take that Brock Purdy's not going to be able to recover. He's not going to be able to throw deep passes anymore because supposedly Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't throw deep after the Super Bowl. I mean, the stuff that was coming out yesterday because Brock threw a couple of picks was just absurd.
Allow me to be the voice of reason. And this is just going to be a very, very baseline, easy take. In training camp, the defense and offense are installing their plays. And as much as everyone wants to believe that the playbook year to year is the same exact play, or they're the same exact group of plays, they're not. The 49ers and every single offense have their base plays, but they add new things as they see things on films. Copycat league. Okay, I see Miami doing something. We're going to add that into our offense. But you're trying it out during training camp. You have to figure out what you can get away with, what you can't get away with. You don't try it in a game. You try it during training camp. If training camp stats matter, then Aaron Judge isn't good at baseball because he hit 087 in spring training. Let me reiterate. I don't give a shit. I don't. It does not matter. I think we would have all learned our lesson from last season with this whole interceptions thing. And by the way, if you're going to throw interceptions, don't throw 3, throw 5. Because when Jimmy Garoppolo threw 5, the 49ers went to the Super Bowl. It does not matter. None of it matters. What matters is objectively looking and seeing who's sharp, talking about wide receivers, offensive linemen, all those things. Because the install for offensive linemen is block, 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 right? Like there's certain things that you have to do on run plays where you have to pull. But essentially, the install is for what are the wide receivers doing? How are they getting themselves open? What does the offense look like as a whole, right? In red zone, the field shrinks. There's less field. By the way, the 49ers have a good defense. What about that? What about that? Please, guys, objectively look at this and just say it does not matter. It is practice. And it's not, I'm not even going to use the Allen Iverson one. Have you ever seen the Patrick Ewing meme, Rob, where he's saying, what kind of shot is that? Do you practice that shot? When? Like he's yelling at his player during a game. When? He was like, I've never seen you practice that, so don't do it. That's exactly it. You don't practice things in the game, and I don't want to hear you practice how you play. You practice how you play during the season. That's not training camp. That's not the same thing at all. Because when you're practicing during the season, you're practicing the game plan, which has to be really perfect. Good thing there's no game here on July 30th. But my God, I want to reiterate, I don't give a shit about training camp stats. They are absolutely meaningless.
And I think the Aaron Judge comparison you brought up is a good one because it's one thing when Brock was coming off having his elbow blown up in the playoffs and then he's throwing interceptions at training camp. But we have a year now of data from Brock Purdy. We've seen him play for a year. It's not the guy that just started 5 games in the regular season anymore. We've seen he doesn't have an interception problem. He doesn't. He has some, but it's not like a problem that he needs to work on. So let's stop freaking out because he had 3 in 1 day in practice.
And one bounces off of Logan Thomas's chest. So there's your context right there for that one. Another one was the offensive line protection broke down a little bit and he had to just toss one up. But again, do it in practice. That's a point that's really you should be a little bit more nervous about. I would be much more nervous about the offensive line right now than I would be what Brock Purdy's going to do. And then another one was just a really good play, from, I think it was a bit of an overthrow. But come on.
Are we really at the point now where not only do the 49ers have to win the Super Bowl, no matter what happens to them?
They got to win training camp.
They got to win training. No interceptions in the playoffs, in the regular season, in the preseason, in training camp, in practice. They got to be perfect, Jay. Perfect. Yep. Everybody, all the time. Otherwise, just win. Just be perfect. Well, I mean, come on. All I'm asking for is total perfection.
Yeah. I mean, you have to win the fake games, the real games, and then the big game. Like, come on. So, yeah, very interesting about training camp. It's just, I think it's strange that we're back here doing this again when last year literally proved that none of that mattered. And again, you could have been a little bit more concerned last year because of the UCL injury, and you might be thinking, oh, wow, arm strength, we don't know. Well, that's gone. That's completely gone. Now it's just Josh Allen threw 3 interceptions yesterday in a row. Oh, my God, guys. Josh Allen's cooked. I think Buffalo needs to move off him. Come on. It's practice. It's practice. But speaking of practice, and we might as well just talk about the offensive line, Trent Williams is still not there. And Trent Williams is making himself a fortune sitting in the house right now. I mean, look, let's be completely frank. Trent Williams is no dummy, right? Trent Williams sees that the 49ers don't draft his replacement. They don't draft a tackle, right? And Trent Williams knows the chatter about this offensive line. Even with Trent Williams on the line, people were worried. Now Trent Williams says, I'm not going to be there. Enjoy this line. No matter what you think of this offensive line, it is considerably worse without Trent Williams. Like, it's not even a debate. But Trent Williams is no dummy. Trent Williams is letting this play out, and he's sitting in the house no matter how much the fine is. He's sitting in the house, and the number goes up as the reports come piling in because he is the best left tackle in the world. And there is not any way that anyone can explain this to me like I'm 5, that you are not paying Trent Williams if you think you have a chance of winning the Super Bowl this year.
It's weird to me that it's gotten to this point. It really has. Like John Lynch said that they've been talking about it for a while. Like what is the debate? We know the market. We know what he's worth. We know he's really good. Like, how are you still not figuring this out? It's just ridiculous that it constantly takes this long. You sit in a room with his agent and you decide at the end of the day, this is over with. Come hell or high water, this holdout is going to be over with. What do you think, that one day all of a sudden they're going to wake up and take your lowball offer? Like, no, get it done. You never win these, by the way, 49ers. You set the market with Bosa. You set the market with Warner. You set the market with Christian McCaffrey. You set the market with Juszczyk. You set the market with Kittle. You never win. So this whole waited out strategy, not working for you.
Also, to be completely fair, if Trent Williams was there, he wouldn't be practicing that much anyway.
No.
I mean, you look at the way that they're staggering their vet days, and God bless you, Kyle Shanahan, for understanding that. Hey, Nick Bosa, take the day off. Hey, Christian McCaffrey, take the day off. Hey, Trent Williams, you probably have a few days off as well, too. Got to make it through the season. Can't just win training camp. So he wouldn't have been there either. But because he's holding out, the panic meter rises because you are looking at an offensive line that, if this doesn't get done, could be out there week 1. And yes, Brock Purdy better have a leap. Because he might be running for his life a little bit, man. I mean, it's a good thing he's faster than Lamar Jackson, right, Rob?
If you ask some people. Yeah, I don't want to see that line out there against the Jets in week 1 with no Trent Williams. That would be a scary, scary proposition. Did you see, by the way, Aaron Rodgers is not going to play in the preseason? The Jets said today, Robert Saleh said. So that means when Rodgers suits up against the Niners week 1, he will not have played a full game since week 18 of 2022.
Yeah. That's fine. I mean, look, same Aaron Rodgers' first rodeo. I mean, I think the only thing that you really would be worried about is, I guess, rapport with his new team. Like, if this was the Packers and he's running it back for like the 13th straight year, like, then you'd feel a little bit. So, I mean, I guess you could look at it that way, but the Jets are going to be a tough problem, man. Again, defensively, they're really good, and Breece Hall's a dog, and, I think they'll be all right. He'll make enough throws. The 49ers are still going to win that game, but Aaron Rodgers is a professional. He knows how to play football, but it is going to be interesting to see him in his first action in how long? How long, right? But I understand the Jets for not putting him out there. That would be so Jets to have him come back and then have him get injured like in a preseason game.
They're so, I just think they're so like desperate to see him actually play that they're like, screw it. We can't risk it because we're the Jets and we know if we do, some fluke thing will happen and he'll get hurt again. If he's going down in the regular season, damn it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and James Wilson says Purdy got a quick release and Trent didn't help block Chris Jones anyway. Chris Jones doesn't play outside. James, he's a defensive tackle. He plays inside. That's why Spencer Burford and Brendel and all those guys. Chris Jones doesn't line up against Trent Williams. Trent Williams didn't have a great Super Bowl either, though. Let's just say that.
If he did line up against Trent Williams, I would have taken that matchup certainly over Spencer Burford and anybody on the right side of the 49ers.
Or it's just or in the middle with Brendel, right? He plays inside. So I mean, he may rotate outside here and there, but he never really went against Trent Williams in that game.
What do you think about Dominic Puni getting his shot now? Feliciano's hurt. Spencer Burford has the broken hand. It's your time, Dominic.
I love that. Look, Spencer Burford has a broken hand. And he might be out for 3 weeks. They don't know about the surgery yet, anything like that. I did find it interesting that Spencer Burford was given the first crack with the ones. And I understand John Feliciano's coming off of a injury, but I do believe that they're literally giving it to Burford to say, hey, if you want this, we're going to give you the first crack at it because our safety net is Feliciano, who played very well. Some would say that injury at right guard is probably the real heartbreaker with the Dre Greenlaw injury because then you have to bring Burford in. But it's interesting to see that because they're giving Burford a shot. Now Burford's out. And they still have Feliciano, who's been rotating with Brendel as well, too, because those guys are coming back from injury and they're bringing them back slowly. Puni has a chance right away to, and for everybody that says, well, rookies don't play and, Kyle doesn't like his rookies. Burford started rookie year right off the bat. So there is a shot. If Puni kicks ass, I don't think you could just sit there and say, he's a rookie. Let's not put him in there.
And the only thing I didn't like was Chris Forrester saying, well, yeah, Puni might end up being the best guy, but it's bright lights on Monday Night Football. Do you really want to throw him in there? Yes. Like there is no soft landing. It's the NFL. I'm amazed. I feel like Shanahan and Forrester and this coaching staff have this like aversion, like a young player making like a rookie mistake is like intolerable to them. They would rather have a veteran player make a mistake because he physically can't do it anymore than have a young player make a mental mistake, which I don't like. To me, those are not the same thing. Young players are going to make mistakes. It's inevitable, but the 49ers seem to have this aversion to that. So I hope that's not the attitude. If Puni is the best guy, throw him out there week 1 and let's go.
Yeah. The best players should play 100%, but it's going to be interesting to see what this offensive line shakes out as. I think they look at Feliciano almost like Brunskill, where if one guy falters, we have somebody who can step right in right away. But if Puni or Burford can make themselves, solidify themselves at a position, that just makes their offensive line that much more deep. And I think that is something that is kind of worth watching at this point in terms of everything's good and everybody wants 5 All-Pros on the offensive line. Newsflash, it doesn't happen. And then everybody wants backups to be really good. But I say the biggest drop-off from talent level is at quarterback and offensive line. That's the biggest drop-off of, hey, you're a good offensive lineman. Your backup is down here. That's why he's the backup. Anybody who has an offensive lineman that's this good and then a backup this good, please let me know where it's at, like where that is. So Offensive line isn't as easy as all that. Let's get 5 All-Pros in here. Cool. I think everybody wants that, but that's not like how it works. And even the best offensive linemen have their weak links. So it is what it is, but we're going to have to definitely monitor this going forward. Again, obviously, I think they're going to run it back to Brendel. I think, with Forrester, they love him. I think that's their first move. I think the issue that they're going to find is Jake Brendel the solid center that you saw early on in the season, or is he the guy at the end of the season who kind of tapered off? And was that due to injury, or is that just due to his normal play? That's something that they've got to figure out, right? Like in that way. And then Feliciano has experience at center. He was obviously good at right guard down the stretch. Again, in the Super Bowl, you could make the argument that the Feliciano injury is just as important as Dre Greenlaw because of the miscommunication, right? Like, and it's something that Feliciano would have known right away. So, going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. But I think this is the part that everyone's worried about the most, and I think rightfully so.
Yeah, look, that's the only weak link on the 49ers offense. Everywhere else is great. And if they have an offensive line with Trent Williams, who's a stud at left tackle, Aaron Banks, who's I would say a league average left guard, nothing, not great, not terrible.
Yeah.
And then if Pooney can start and being a league average player at right guard, you're talking about upgrading the offensive line. You're talking about upgrading the 49ers offense, period, which again, they scored 60 touchdowns last year. Yes, please. I will take that. And that's entirely possible this year.
Also, by the way, PFF came out with an article. The 49ers have the best red zone offense in the league per EPA, per, percentages, everything as well, too. That's something that it's crazy to think, right? Offensive line. We're worried. The 49ers offense just hums. Like it just scores whenever it wants, man. And it's just funny to see that the discussion between what would hold the 49ers back and what wouldn't. Well, this 49ers team had this same offensive line last season, putting up 30 a game pretty much, in almost every game. And then, obviously in the Super Bowl, you have different circumstances as to why. I thought the 49ers defense played very well for large stretches of that game. So it's interesting, when we get into this. And again, it brings us back to the conversation about like how hard it is to win a Super Bowl. And yeah, we're not trying to bring up old wounds or anything like that. But yeah, it's not easy. If it was easy, everybody else would do it, But maybe if we find a way to get Kansas City out of the Super Bowl for 1 year, might be all right.
I'd be down for that. Not gonna lie, I'm all set with seeing Kansas City. They've won plenty. Patrick Mahomes already has 3 Super Bowl championships. Like, think about that. The man has 3 rings already. 2 of them on our backs, Jason.
Yeah.
I can't stand it. Before we go, I did want to talk about the kick returner spot.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I loved what Deebo Samuel, he talked about how he thinks there's going to be a ton of big plays. I think there's going to be like a kickoff return every other game in the NFL for a touchdown, I'm saying. I think it's going to be wild. Nobody knows how to defend this thing. The league is full of guys who are incredible in space. Hell, the 49ers have like 7 guys I would love to see back there. And oh, by the way, I don't know if you caught this. Deebo Samuel said he wants to return kicks. Like, yes, please. Don't make Deebo have to fight for the job. Just give it to him. You're back there, Deebo. He could have like 5 or 6 kick returns for touchdowns. It's exactly what he's good at. Give him the ball in space, get blockers in front of him, give him a little bit of a running start. Like, they could go out and just tear the hell out of everybody.
You know what's hilarious? Speaking of the Kansas City Chiefs, they've been tinkering around with some stuff. And I don't know if you guys seen any of their training camp videos, because they're one of those weird teams that allows you to, record the 11 on 11s. My goodness. And they also don't charge their fans to go to training camp.
Imagine that.
Imagine that, right? Crazy. But there's a play where I believe it's Mahomes throws to Tony. Tony throws to Mahomes. Mahomes throws to Tony, all behind the line. Then they throw it down the field to Xavier Worthy. And I'm just like, oh, man, they're just having fun. Sky Moore is on kickoff, and he threw an interception on the kickoff. So I think everybody's kind of just trying to figure out how they're going to make this happen. But when you look at the way that this has been going, and if you've ever seen the XFL kickoff, which is basically what they've adopted, it's the defense can't come down until Deebo receives the ball, and then he has the convoy in front of him. And it's essentially, 10 on 10, right? Like, and the kicker is the last guy, right? I don't mind it, because when the ball's in his hands, Deebo sees it. Deebo knows. And the reason that this has been instituted is to stop injuries from happening. It's literally like a play. It's literally like a normal play. So I wouldn't mind this. I don't know if that's what they're thinking. Maybe someone else steps up. Maybe training camp warrior MVP Trent Taylor, is somebody that they want to do this with. But when the ball's in his hands, there's nobody on this team that's probably better than Deebo Samuel and anybody in the league.
Give me Deebo. Give me 10 guys in front of him, like hat on a hat. Like Deebo's going to win every time.
I'll take my chance.
Yeah. Like, I really do think that the Niners are going to be able to score a bunch on that. And honestly, I think it's going to affect a lot of games because the number one way a worse team beats a better team is special teams plays. If you've got a team that's just really good on the return game and they're starting every possession at like the 40 or midfield or whatever, that makes a huge, huge difference. I really do think people are sleeping on this kick return thing. And I think what's going to happen, especially early in the season, is you're going to see a bunch of big returns and a bunch of touchdowns because nobody knows how to defend it. If you heard the Niners special teams coach talking about it, he's like, we don't really know. We're going to have to wait and see. So early in the year, I think you're going to see a lot of huge gains and everybody's going to go to school on it. And halfway through the year, you're going to see a big adjustment. But all the stocky, old, stuffy NFL owners are going to be all bent out of shape at the beginning of the year because the kickoff returns, it's too much change. It's too much, too fast. We don't like it. They're going to get all ticked off and you're going to talk about the rule changing going back. And then the NFL will adjust in the second half of the year and it won't be quite so crazy.
And think about what we just said about the 49ers offense. They were starting at the 25 every single time.
Right.
They never had any good sort of long kick return. If we got to the 30 or 40, you're sitting there like, oh, wow, that was a surprise. So anything like this would be really cool, like in terms of, flipping field position. If you need a big play, sometimes I think what people forget, and kick return was the most exciting play in football. Like think Devin Hester in the Super Bowl, like that type of guy, who's also, by the way, being inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2 days. We have football on Thursday. I don't care who's playing. I don't care what backups are in. I don't care. I am locked in. But this part of it about flipping the field, the kick return could be something that jolts your team, right? Like you're trying to start a comeback, you get a nice kick and it gets everybody going. I think back to I believe the 2021 Green Bay game in which Deebo led off the half and the second half, big run, got everybody going. I think, again, those are the types of little things that we're forgetting. And I think with these new rules, Deebo is in a prime position to take advantage of it because he'll have all that blocking in front of him. It's literally not just people flying down from different positions and filling the gaps. It's going to be basically everybody running down in a straight line. Who's going to block better? And then if you're talking about who can make somebody miss with the ball in their hands, then give me Deebo Samuel over probably anybody in the league.
By the way, Deebo Samuel had a 45-yard kick return. Jimmy Garoppolo got 1 first down, and then the 49ers had to kick a field goal. Just saying.
Cool, thanks. All right, cool. I mean, hey, but the 49ers won that game. You just had to throw a pot shot like at the end there, right? Didn't you?
I mean, it's too easy. It's
just there.
I haven't seen a single shot of him in Rams camp, by the way. Jimmy Garoppolo? Oh, you have?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He threw it was I believe it was the first or second day he ended the team period with a touchdown pass to Davis Allen. And I was like, there it is, like the Leo the pointing thing. So it's cool. Hey, Jimmy, good luck to you, man. You're a really handsome guy. You're going to be great in LA, man, after you get past the suspension. But I did want to talk about one more thing real quick too. So while we're talking offensive line and everything, and we just finished with Deebo, defensive line is something that's been a point of contention. And I think, obviously, we're finding out that Drake Jackson is not going to be there for training camp, and it's starting to look really, really scary now for the depth. Although, I will say this. I don't think the 49ers were banking on Drake Jackson in any way. Drake Jackson had a chance to be free money, found money. Like, if Danny Gray takes a step, if Ambry Thomas takes a step, if he took a step, like, it's like, fine, that would be cool, but we're not banking on it. But Malik Collins had something really interesting to say because he was asked about filling in for Eric Armstead. And his press conference was at the end. And I understand it's really hard to sit through those YouTube 49ers press conferences because they're an hour. And it's like, it's literally 20 minutes in between the next person going on and you don't want to be there. But Malik Collins was asked about some of the stuff that he's able to bring over from Houston with D'Amico. And he says the same exact verbiage. He was like, it's the transition's pretty seamless. He goes, what is he learning about Chris Kosurik? He said, learning how to finish. It's something that Kerry Hyder told me while I was in Houston. That's really interesting. That was a nice little nugget. Then he was asked about Eric Armstead and filling in for Eric Armstead. And I thought he had a pretty interesting answer. Do you have the clip, Rob, or are we just going to go with?
I don't have the clip.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have it right now.
No, I know what he said. So they asked him about Eric Armstead and filling in, and he said, those are some big shoes to fill. I understand his importance to the organization, to the community, him being from SAC. He goes, I'm just here to be the biggest version of myself. And Eric Armstead retweeted him and said, I've never met you, man. Don't let them paint the narrative about you. Go out there and be great. Have a great season. Thought that was really interesting that everybody kind of understands that it's going to take a group of people, Collins, Jordan Elliott, Gross Matos, all those guys are going to have to fill in with Kevin Givens and others to fill in and fill this role. It's going to take a group of guys to do this. There it is, as opposed to doing it with just one person. And I don't think there's a one-for-one person who can fill in for Eric Armstead.
Well, it's supposed to be Javon Hargrave, really. Like, he's the guy
That's one tackle.
Right. Should really step up and be kind of the pass rush presence. Armstead's response was a little weird to me. Don't let them create the narrative. They just asked him a question, dude. Like, calm down. That was a little weird. But okay.
I think it's because I'm sorry, Rob. I think it's because everyone found a way to pile on Armstead. They're like, oh, well, no sack numbers. Well, it's just the impact that he had and the way that it offset for everybody else to be able to do their own thing. I think it goes further than stats. And I think that's what he means by, if Collins goes out there, right, and Collins has no sacks or, maybe one or two pressures, but if you're watching him eat up a double team and get Javon Hargrave a sack or let Bosa get something, that's bigger than a stat. And I think Eric Armstead will always be a victim of his statistical production when his impact went further than that whenever he was on the field. Now, he was injured. I think that's a fair criticism because not being on the field is one thing, but there's no doubt. I mean, Eric Armstead was having an incredible Super Bowl, when he was out there. Like, he had some really big plays. His impact goes past stats, and I think that's what he's talking about, Rob, because that was so much of the discussion around him while he was here, and now the 49ers are going to find out how hard it is to replace him when he's healthy and continue to have him on the field.
Yeah, this is a point I first heard Haberman and Middlecoff make, and I hadn't thought about it until they said it, but they're right. Like, Eric Armstead survived multiple head coach changes. That doesn't happen unless you are a really good player and unless you help make life easier for the other players around you. And he did. He switched positions and played at an all-pro level when he went from defensive end to defensive tackle. Eric Armstead was a really good player for a really long time. I agree with you. It goes beyond the box score. You have to actually watch the games. He was a captain. He played well, injured at the end of last year, too. Don't forget, he had an injury, which I believe is going to have him on PUP.
He's on PUP. He's on PUP. Yeah.
He's still recovering from that. So he's a really good player for sure. And the Niners do have a hole to fill there. Javon Hargrave said he's in the quote unquote best shape of his life. Okay. Take that.
Take a drink.
He also said it took him a while to learn the defensive scheme, that he didn't really get it until the end of last year. And by the time he got it, he was hurt. I thought that was really interesting because I think most people think of a defensive lineman like, what scheme? You line up, you rush the quarterback. Like, what is there to learn? But apparently he's telling you he didn't really quite get it until the end of last year.
Yeah, and that's what I found interesting about Malik Collins talking about the transition from D'Amico over here. He said it's the same exact thing. He's like, so much of it is there. The verbiage is the same. So I'm expecting Malik Collins to have an instant impact based on who's around him, because I do think Leonard Floyd is going to be great. Again, durable, 10 sacks, pretty much lock him in. I do think Malik Collins is going to have a really, really big impact right away because there is going to be a seamless transition. And I do think that that's something that when Collins said that, it made me think about Hargrave as well, too. So, yes, I do think the 49ers are going to have a good defense. And for the one complaint I would say this year, I think that the depth is as thin as it's been for a while, right? Oh, and by the way, Drake Jackson had 3 sacks in week 1. 2 of those are because of Eric Armstead. 2 of them are literally because of Eric Armstead. If he doesn't push Kenny Pickett into Drake Jackson's arms. So, yeah, 2 sacks, that's cool. Armstead should get at least one of them or two of them because he's the one who created it. Again, watching the game, not the box score. The defensive line depth is a little scary right now. I'll be the first to admit it. I do think I see the vision with what they're doing with Yitzhak Gross Matos because he does feel like Charles Omenihu inside, outside, and I alluded to that, based on what Kyle said, and I posted a video of it as well, too, about a few of his reps and wrote an article about it. But, yeah, I think the 49ers, this is why they're prioritizing secondary, and they're looking to the secondary to make plays because I do feel like we can get by with a certain level of pass rush. It doesn't have to be to the ferocious nature of the 2019 team because we have guys who can cover on the back end. So I do think this defense is going to be better, but this defense is going to be better for different reasons. And if they can run defend, then you'll see improvement.
I think that maybe they are undergoing a little bit of a shift. Early on in previous years, it was the defensive line getting pressure with 4 early, making life easier on the secondary. Now I think it's flipped. I think it's going to be the secondary is going to be able to hold up and give this defensive line, who might not be as deep and might not be able to have as many fresh bodies in there all the time, it's going to give them opportunities to pressure the quarterback. I think you could make the argument, Jay, that this is the strongest secondary the 49ers have had in the Kyle Shanahan.
Without question. Without them even playing a snap yet, Rob.
Yeah.
And that's not hyperbole. And I could say the same for the wide receiver room, as long as, hamstrings start to heal up and everybody starts to get out there as well, too. But yeah, dare I say, this is a term that we really didn't hear too much under, with this defense and this defensive line, coverage sacks. Coverage sacks might be a real thing. And I think the 49ers have watched how things have kind of played out. And I think particularly in the Super Bowl, in which your defensive line is not going to get any holding calls. So it doesn't matter how good your defensive line is. You got to have guys on the back end who can cover. And I think that's what they're prioritizing, whether it works or not. You have to give them kudos for changing the play and not doing the same thing over and over again. So, yeah, I definitely think this defense is going to be better. If they can run defend, there's no doubt on my mind that they're going to be the best coverage unit that they've had. And that could help a pass rush that isn't nearly as star-ridden and deep as it used to be. It could be possibly league average or above average, and that would suffice enough with this defense to make them even better than last season.
As much as the 49ers talk about, like, we got to play defense our way and all that, look at who Shanahan has gone after for defensive coordinator. Steve Spagnuolo, Bill Belichick, and Plan D. Jeff Ulbrich was up there on the list too. And then now they're going with this Sorensen-Staley hybrid thing. But that was not business as usual. Like, Steve Spagnuolo doesn't play the same defense that the 49ers play. Bill Belichick could have done whatever the hell he wanted. Kyle said, literally, I told him he could come in and do whatever he wants. So I do think the 49ers have kind of recognized, that they need to evolve as they go into year, what is it now, 7?
And it's a little bit like, to take it a step further, Steve Wilkes was a secondary guy. And Sorensen's a former DB. So I think they were trying to get there last season. And that's why I think they're so disappointed with Wilkes, because the pass rush wasn't married to the coverage. So if you're looking at the way they're kind of doing it, D'Amico's former linebacker, he learned his way, as he went through it. Wilkes is a secondary guy. They end up with Sorensen and Staley, who are both secondary guys. I think they've been trying to prepare for this shift for a little while. It's just they now, this offseason, added Isaac Yadam, Rock Yassin. They get Renardo Green, Malik Mustafa. They've got secondary guys now, on top of the fact that Ward and Lenore were so good last year. So, yeah, I think the shift has been happening a little bit longer than we'd like to believe. This isn't a one-year thing. I think that's what they wanted last season, was a little bit better coverage, because they recognize the same thing.
Do you think it's going to work?
You know what? It's July 30th. I'm optimistic. I think the 49ers are going 20. I think the 49ers are going 20-0 and winning the Super Bowl. What are you talking about, Rob? Of course. I think it's going to work. I think number one defense is right there in the cards. I think the 49ers are going to turn the football over. They're going to get a bunch of sacks. They're going to win games on the back of this defense and close games out with this defense. Yeah, absolutely, Rob. It's time to be optimistic on the 30th, man.
If you can't be optimistic on July 30th, you're right. What the hell are you doing?
Right. You might not actually like football if you're not optimistic right now on July 30th. Like, you might be a person who watches it, but like hate watches it. Like, you have to be optimistic right now and just enjoy what's going on. So, hey, Rob, an hour. Good show, man. I think we covered a lot of stuff. And as you guys know, Steph is out there. So make sure that you guys are ready for her video later on. She's going to empty the notebook and let you guys know what's in there. Look out for her tweets as well. There's a lot of good coverage going on from training camp. Just, it's up to you to figure out who you're going to listen to, which is, Rob, before we go, I live for the conflicting reports. I live for, this person said this and this person said this is my favorite time of the year because everybody somehow sees things differently and processes things differently. It's so funny to me. I really love it. I am living for all of this back and forth on Twitter.
It's so funny because we get conflicting reports and then whoever ends up being right wants the credit for being right. It's like, well, wait a minute. Half the people were saying that the complete opposite thing happened, but it's so frustrating living 3,000 miles away like I do. I just want to know what's happening. How can we not? It's 2024 in the year of our Lord. How can we not know for sure what is happening at camp?
That's why I don't have strong opinions, right? Like the strongest opinions I'll have is when I'm there. I'm not there this year. This will be the second straight year that I'm not there. If I'm there, then I'm going to stand 10 toes on it because I saw it. And that's something that and again, you don't have to believe me either. But at least I feel convicted. Take a drink. Are we going to do that every time, like convicted and all these like, John Lynch terms come up? If I feel convicted in it because I saw it, that's cool. But you don't have to believe me. It's just someone will see a Brock interception and say that was all on Brock. Someone will see a Brock interception and say that wasn't Brock's fault. I don't know for sure. I can't see because 1, they don't allow people to record, and 2, I wasn't there.
All we know is Brock was intercepted. And
you need to panic, burn everything down, and realize that the 49ers are not going to make the playoffs at all because of training camp interceptions. I couldn't think of a better way to end this show. But thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the Gold Podcast, the Gold Standard Podcast Network on YouTube, wherever you get your audio podcasts as well. Follow Rob on Twitter at StatsOnFire. Follow me on Twitter at JasonAponte2103. Steph's video will be on after, so make sure you guys are tuned into that so you can get all the details of what happened today. I kind of trust Steph, so I think you guys should too as well. But for Rob, for Jay, we're out of here. Thank you guys.
Peace.